If I could have everybody move toward your seats, we'll once again try to begin on time. If you want to do... Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's great to see everybody here. And almost fall day, it feels like. We're still in the middle of summer. School hasn't begun yet, at least most parts of the region. Call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. We've got a few people arriving late this morning, some other conflicts. So I'm going to suggest our item 3 is a public group photo. We're going to move that to a little later in the meeting when we have a full board here present. We'll begin with introductions. Norm Steen, Teller County Commissioner, serving as your chair.
Neil Levy, Woodland Park.
Sharon Thompson, City Fountain.
Yolanda Aviles, City of Colorado Springs.
Andy Pico, City of Colorado Springs.
Ken Jure, Manitou Springs.
Don Wilson, Town of Monument, and to my right is Jared Reimer, an intern for the Town of Monument.
Tom Falls-Rano, Peterson Air Force Base.
Ron Jeffrey, I'm the Director of Staff at Schriever Air Force Base.
Hal Allgaier, Fort Carson.
Rob Bearden, United States Air Force Academy.
Terry Storm, Chamber and EDC Military Affairs Council.
Bruce Davis, City of Victor.
Andy Gunning, PPACG. If there are no objections, we'll move that group photo, item 3, to later in the agenda, probably kind of a time to be determined, perhaps. Move on to the consent items, item 4. Is there anybody who'd like to remove an item for discussion?
Any other public comment before that?
Yes, let's see. We do. Yes, thank you, Neil. And I did promise we would do that. Before I move on to item 4, let's take if there's any additional public comments this morning. Public comment, yes. Deborah, up to the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Stout-Meininger, Community Advocate, Citizen Scientist. I've come today because of the concerns over what's happening with Highway 25 and the agendas of the toll road, not just up in the Gap, but all along 25 going down to the south end of Colorado. Now, CDOT has made it very clear that what monies they get of our tax dollars and federal grants, the voters have no control over what happens to that and how they use it. And last couple of years, we've had the sad experiences of the people being, let's say, confused by omissions on ballot measures that said road expansions and used expressions like express lanes and managed lanes, which for CDOT we've discovered means toll roads. The fact that this could negatively affect our communities if that goes toll roads all the way down. It will affect it negatively even with that gap portion of it. And now there's agenda to get $30 more million for putting in utilities infrastructure, electrical underground lines up and down Highway 25 through El Paso County. This is not what the people wanted, and the fact that PPRTA had funds pulled in, county did the last time, for a toll road project, that it was not presented properly to the public when they voted for it. And it seems to be happening again because this is the infrastructure they needed up in the gap as well for putting in the monitors that toll roads use now. They're not toll booths, it is monitors that are along the road. This needs to be a cautionary tale because this is being done without the consent of the public, the majority of the public. And I know in El Paso County, since I moved here in '76, that it was always shooting down the toll road. And to have Commissioner Mark Waller in a public comment meeting say that, let's say, misguiding the public by omission on the last ballot measure was necessary to make sure that the public said yes no matter what is creepy in my book on so many levels. And PPACG, as well as the PPRTA, are supposed to be representatives of the public. There needs to be a stronger stand to protect the economy as well as the safety of the public. And that's why I'm bringing that up here. This is not in the best interest for our economy, and the fact that now the accidents up in that construction area are 3 times what they were, the one per day, before the construction average. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment this morning? All right, we'll close that portion of our meeting. Now move on to item 4, consent items. Is there any board member like to pull an item for separate discussion? There's a motion to approve the consent items as a block. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? A second from Andy Pico. Any discussion? All in favor say aye, please. Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. Those pass. Action items 5A, JLUS Implementation Committee modifications. Brian.
Good morning, everyone. Brian Potts, Joint Land Use Study Program Manager at Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. At the June 12th board meeting, all of you approved the seats that would be on the JLUS Implementation Policy Committee. With that, we had our first meeting on July 25th. At that meeting, we talked about the role of the committee and sort of the tasks that were aligned with this grant, and then also talking about some of the actions that are involved. And as part of that discussion, it was also recognized that the policy committee thought that it would be best and more streamlined, given our 18-month grant window, that we streamline to just having one committee instead of having a policy and a technical committee. With that consideration, that meant that there is some entities that had been on the technical committee that would need to be added to the policy committee in order to have all the entities at the table. So with that, the JLUS Implementation Policy Committee recommended an addition of 5 seats, 3 voting members and 2 non-voting members, and wanted to refer that back up to the board for consideration and recommend approval of that. Those entities are CDOT, Defense Mission Task Force within the Military Affairs Council, and the Colorado State Land Board. Those 3 entities would be voting members, and then non-voting members, because they're federal agencies, with the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management. The discussion was good, and it seemed like, based upon the issues that we're dealing with, this made a lot of sense. So the committee wanted to refer that matter back to all of you and get your thoughts. So there is a proposed motion there, but feel free if there's any questions on why certain entities need to be added. I can certainly discuss that here. So,
Any
yes.
questions for Brian? Yes, Don.
Just some background on why we did pick voting members versus what made voting members versus non-voting members.
Certainly. Because it is a federal grant, and because this is, while it's not a regulatory committee, it is one that's making recommendations. Part of the scope of that grant is that federal entities cannot make, are not supposed to be making formal votes as part of deliberating these, what's happening with these federal funds. just because there are other federal agencies. So with the military, for example, and with any other federal agency that might be involved in this, if USDA were involved, it'd be the same thing. So that's kind of the background, is that it's supposed to be local and state agencies and local and state entities that are making kind of decisions when it comes to recommended actions.
Other questions? We have a proposed motion. I'll ask someone to make that motion in a moment. But a proposed motion is to recognize the JLUIS Implementation Committee as the sole JLUIS Implementation Committee and to approve and add the following entities as voting and non-voting members to the JLUIS Implementation Committee. Additional voting members: A, CDOT; B, Defense Mission Task Force, Military Affairs Council, and the Colorado State Land Board, 3 voting members. Additional non-voting members: U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
A motion.
I
Motion
defer.
I'll take the second.
A motion from Councilmember Pico, second by Mayor Levy. Any discussion?
I do have a question,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. So it's just not on the page here, but who are the other voting members? What's the model for that?
I did not include the roster that was approved at the June meeting, but there are about 31 entities that were approved at that. It's going to be the entire membership of PPACG that are voting members, as well as then we have our 8 non-voting members, which are going to be the military bases and the offices of U.S. senators, office of U.S. representatives. Those are on the non-voting. Also on voting, we added, of course, the entities that are part of the original study area, which would be outside of PPACG, such as Fremont County, Pueblo County, City of Pueblo, Pueblo West Metro District. Sure, I'm blanking on some others, but off the top of my head, it amounted prior to this to about 31 entities, 8 non-voting, 23 voting, and so this will add, addition of these to that body. But we feel like we can handle that number of people.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5B, CAC membership of Northeast. Jessica, take this one for us, please.
Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. So this agenda item you saw a version of back in March. It was postponed at that time, which is why it's back to you today. The Pikes Peak Area Community Advisory Committee, was approached by NEPCO with a request to join the CAC with a seat similar to KONO, League of Women Voters, and the Chamber and EDC. Instead of being appointed by a PPACG member or appointed by the CAC themselves as a citizen at large, those appointments are handled by those organizations. They are, of course, like all appointments to the CAC, approved by the Board of Directors before they are an official appointment. At the February CAC meeting, there were 2 discussions that took place at the same time. Those discussions were evaluation of the NEPCO request and a request to look at our bylaws. We had never received a request like that, and we wanted to know how we should handle that going forward in the future. Part of the reason why the board item was postponed was so that the CAC could review their bylaws, propose their amendment, and have that discussed. Those bylaws changed to allow organizational memberships within the CAC were changed at the May board meeting. You all approved that change. So the CAC had recommended that NEPCO be assigned an organizational seat to the CAC, and it is here to you today for your discussion on that. And the main reason it is an action item is this item was not a unanimous item at the CAC. There was discussion about the possibility of overrepresentation of one area, of fairness because NEPCO was the only one to put in a request, and additional concern. I really think that was the main concerns. Well, actually, it was about them being overly focused on specific categories rather than the broader PPACG missions. The overarching CAC and the dominant vote did say that they believed this would be a valuable contribution and that as a community organization they fit very well within the mission of the CAC. I do have my vice chair here. Would you like to add anything, Tim?
Come up to the microphone.
All the way up, sorry.
Yeah. While Tim's coming up, Jessica said the reason this is an action item, the distinction is normally an appointment like this would be under consent and really wouldn't warrant any discussion. But since it wasn't unanimous, that's why it's on action with discussion instead of just under consent.
Tim O'Donnell, Vice Chair of the CAC. We had some discussion. There was a lot of confusion at the CAC because we were dealing with basically two issues. One, changing the bylaws to be able to address this accurately and orderly the next time, but also the NEPCO membership. And even though we didn't come out 100% in approval of NEPCO, the vast majority did. And the thought was we needed representation from that big growth area up in the northeast area of the county, because that's where a lot of the roads and, things are, houses, rooftops are going to be going. And I'm the Kono seat, so, if anybody was going to object to it, it'd be me. But I was okay with it because I think it's important to get that representation. So we were dealing with two different issues, and I think the big confusion on the CAC was that we were dealing with two separate issues. However, after we approved the bylaws and got those in, we still felt like NEPCO had or would have fulfilled all of those conditions for the new bylaws to get membership, even if we requested them to start all over again. Plus the fact that we'd already voted on the CAC to accept their membership. So we felt like it was not going to be the right thing to do to go back and make them restart the whole process again because we didn't have bylaws in place to handle that particular situation.
Okay. Any other questions? Andy and then Mayor. Okay.
You win again.
Neil.
Could you address the issue of overrepresentation? I think the CAC already has a number of people up in the north part, but I'm not. My recollection is a little bit hazy on how many that there are. I know we've got a couple of the communities have representatives.
El Paso County has 3 representatives that they can appoint from anywhere within the county. That is their selection, how they choose to do that. So if they appointed all 3 of theirs from northern El Paso County, that's what we'd have. Otherwise, they have Monument and Palmer Lake. Those are the only, and then if you consider the northern part of Colorado Springs as an also representative.
Do we have a northern Colorado Springs rep? I don't think we have one that's focused like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Okay, and then the other issue that you mentioned was there were 2 focused. I'm not entirely sure that that's a downside, but as long as they're focused on what a subset of the PPACG is, could you kind of address what it is their focus area is?
One of their major focus areas, as they presented to us, is transportation. We felt that that focus was very good and aligned very strongly with what the CAC sees and with the PPACG addresses, especially within that MPO region. But they did not specifically call out aging or environmental services, which are also dominant programs within PPACG. We did not feel like they were ignoring those. They were just not something that they were currently calling out as a focus.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If you have a specific response to that, Stan?
Well, I'll wait for the mayor.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Stan. He answered my questions.
Oh, because I wanted to make a comment, too.
Okay, Stan and then Sharon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So with regard to this, I don't think I have any problem with it. I mean, actually, you even say it in the first couple of sentences. We do have other organizations that are members of the CAC that have broad representation. The League of Women Voters, KONO, and the Chamber and EDC are the 3 you mentioned in the documentation. So when you think about it, those have broad representations that cut across a lot of communities. So for NEPCO, you can make the point maybe that NEPCO has some overlap or duplication to other people that are representatives, but we already have that as a precedent with these other organizations within the CAC. Therefore, I think it's really just our own discretion as to what we think is appropriate. And I'll make the point that NEPCO is a very helpful and useful organization in the northern part of El Paso County and does represent a lot of citizens and does have common interests to what we worry about here at PPACG. So for me, I'll just make the point that I would be interested in supporting this. Thank you.
Okay. Sharon, and then Tyler.
Yeah, we had quite a discussion about this Friday at the pre-meeting, and Stan, I believe the bylaws changed not to call out specific groups such as the League of Women Voters, KONOS, and Chamber, right? So rather than having those three specific organizations send people, it's just going to be more like who applies. And some of the discussion came around was it will be up to the individual people appointing them to determine this. So Colorado Springs would look at when they had an open seat, if two of their people already say are from northern Colorado Springs, you might say we want somebody in the southern part of town, or the same with the county commissioners. They might say, well, we have three. They have 3 seats. So 2 are already people who live up in that area. We're going to, thank you for applying, but we're going to focus on getting somebody from the other end of town. So we kind of leaving it up to the individual entities to balance it out. And if another group were to apply that represented the interests up in that end of the county, CAC might be free to say, well, we appreciate your interest, but we're just trying to kind of leave it there a little bit broader and for the discretion of the groups to decide.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Trustee Stevens?
Button. Brilliant. Can't mute myself. Along with what Sharon was just sharing, I think that it is important for this organization not to pick and choose specific organizations, but to have generic categories for what types of representation we want on the various committees and allow the strongest candidates to come forward to represent those interests, figure out what an effective advisory committee size is, and get effective and active members in there, because I think that you can easily check the box that we have a member who's seated and representing a specific entity, and they never contribute, they never participate, and it's ineffective. So I think it's much more important to figure out what types of representation we want and not pick and choose specific organizations.
Okay, any other questions, comments, discussion? Yes.
Just one follow-up comment, just as an FYI. Part of the bylaw change was also said that when the term ends for the representatives, that organization has to reapply through the new bylaw process to keep their seat. So there's no dedicated, seats anymore for organizations. They all have to go through that new bylaw process.
Okay. Other comments?
May I ask a question about that?
Yes. Bruce, and then Stan.
All right, just one question. How well represented are the other 2 counties, Teller and Park, on the CAC?
Teller County currently has a county seat. There is also Woodland Park. There is also Green Mountain Falls. Park County currently has a Park County seat and an Alma and Fairplay. Obviously, Cripple Creek and Victor do also have seats. Not all of those are filled. That is one of the dilemmas we do currently face on the CAC. We do have vacancies for Calhan, Rama, Palmer Lake, Alma, Fairplay, Cripple Creek, Victor, and we are waiting for the appointment of Teller County. We're waiting for 2 appointments from El Paso County, and we're waiting for 2 appointments from the city of Colorado Springs.
Okay, because I'm still trying to find somebody from Victor, but I was just want to see that the committee is kind of fairly balanced. So
the seats exist in a very balanced way, but finding representation is occasionally a challenge.
Okay, Stan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So to your point, sir, in this process of NEPCO having to reapply and so forth, and since the bylaws were changed, I'm interested, it's really a question about the bylaws. How are we organizing to address that? So are we going to have some subset of the total number of seats that can be represented by organizations like NEPCO or League of Women Voters? So we will have the option of adjusting that and moving that around over time. Is that the way that is organized now?
The bylaws specifically state that we may have up to 5 organizational seats.
Okay, I think that's very fair. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we do have a proposed motion in Agenda 5B to approve the appointment of NEPCO as a community-based organization seat for a term of May 2019 to May 2022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A motion from Mayor Olson.
I'll second.
A second from Commissioner Vanderwerf. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. Thank you. Okay, move on then to our informational items, beginning with item 6A, 2045 Long-Range Transportation Planning Overview. Catherine. And John Lesados.
I got to start sitting closer. The meeting will be over.
Catch a bus.
Yeah.
You're getting your steps in.
That's right. Mr. Chair, members of the board, real quickly, as a quick introduction, we don't want to have this presentation go on too long, but Catherine is going to kind of go over with you the need for the long-range plan, what the requirements are, why we do it, what our timeline is. And the reason we wanted to do this is the last time that this group adopted a long-range plan was the 2040 RTP back in November of 2015. So not all of you were here to live through that process. Want to make sure that we're being very transparent moving forward. So she's going to give you that background information. We will just sort of let you know that, and she's going to go into much more detail as far as the process, but we're going to be coming to you every month towards the end with different items that are going to need your approval moving forward. The ultimate deadline is that the federal rules state that you need to have a current and compliant long-range plan that is no more than 4 years old or has a horizon year of 25. Our current plan I think goes bad in April of 2020, but we can't just hand the plan in April of 2020 to CDOT for them to do their work and then for the feds to do their work. So January is pretty much our deadline to make sure that everything gets completed, gets to CDOT for them to do their work, to get to the feds for them to do their work, for the plan to actually then be officially adopted and ready to be acted upon. And the reason why that's important, again, is that without that plan in place, that would slow down future obligations. So if you have a federal project that is already obligated and underway, no harm, no foul, you can continue that project. However, if you've got a project that you're looking to obligate and there's not that plan in place by the deadline, you have to wait until that plan does in fact get in place. So it is important that we keep on schedule and we keep moving. We think we've gotten plenty of opportunity in there for you guys to give us your comments. We're trying to bring everything to you twice, once for information, then once for action, so that there are no surprises. But again, if you feel like it's rushed, we are pushing it because we do have sort of a drop certain, because I think drop dead is not appropriate in the workplace, a certain deadline that we have to shoot for. So with that, Catherine, if you wouldn't mind, thank you.
Okay. Hi. Catherine Wenger, Transportation Planner, PPACG. And so, as John said, I'm going to do a quick overview, try not to extend it out too long for you, just so you have an idea of what we're currently working on. So right now we're in, our title of the plan is Moving Forward 2045, and so it extends out to 2045. And so, quick background or overview of what this plan actually covers, or the area. So, of course, the PPACG board covers the green area, and that's Teller County and El Paso County, which is a larger jurisdiction than what we actually cover in this plan. Park, sorry, thank you. And Park County. And so the MPO boundary, which is the outline in blue, is actually what this plan covers. And the MPO is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and that is the federally required transportation and planning area. And that comes along with federal requirements and certain funding eligibilities. And so that's what most of this is focused on. And it also comes along with a TIP requirement in congestion management plans and other aspects of that as well. And then over on the left, you see the entire Colorado state, and these are CDOT TPR regions, or transportation planning regions. And our MPO is actually TPR1 for CDOT, and then we also extend into their TPR 14 as well. And so that comes along with the different funding eligibilities and planning, and who's required to do the planning within those regions. And we have the responsibility as an MPO to do TPR1. So some of those requirements for the MPO, we have the 20-year outlook, as John mentioned. We're required to do this plan every 4 years. Sometimes it's 5 if you're in conformity for air quality, but we're in a maintenance area. So then we also have to have fiscal constraint, make sure that the projects we list in the plan are the funding that we list is reasonably expected to occur. And then we also have to incorporate performance measures which show data analysis and how our region is actually meeting the goals of the region that we set. And then provide opportunities for public feedback throughout the entire process and comment, ensure compliance with our Title VI, which is make sure we reach out to traditionally underserved populations. And then finally, we need to communicate and coordinate with our regional partners, including CDOT, Federal Highway, and Federal Transit Administration. And through that coordination with CDOT in particular, we, as the MPO region, we plan and kind of prioritize projects for the state projects in coordination with them in our region. And then CDOT they do the planning for their other TPRs that are not MPOs, and they coordinate that as well. And so then our long-range plan gets incorporated into the state long-range plan. And so there is a lot of coordination in crossover in those planning processes. So first and foremost, so what does this process kind of look like, and where are we? We do stakeholder and public involvement through this entire process. And so you've probably seen us up here for the last 4 years talking about goals and targets and performance measures and needs analysis and scenario planning and small area forecast. So that's all part of this process. It's been a long 4-year process, and it continues each 4 years, so we'll be coming back to you again. And so we start off with the region vision, mission, and principles. We go to goals and objectives. We make specific goals and performance targets. We establish those needs through a needs analysis and a scenario development. And then we go into producing a fiscally constrained project list with you all and list our priorities for the region through the year of the plan. And then we also evaluate additional considerations such as social and environmental impacts. And then finally, where we are in the process right now is draft document and provide opportunity for public feedback to kind of say, how did we do on this plan? So the front end is more, what would you like to see? The back end is, how are we doing? And then we go into finalizing the plan. And really, there could be another arrow into the next one, because then you start the process over again for the next one. So a little more detail on where we have been or what we've completed so far. We have completed the needs analysis, the small area forecast, project prioritization. We've also created the draft document. We brought that to you for review and for comments. And so right now we've incorporated the comments from our committees, and we have prepared edits to go out to public. So what you're going to be seeing now is actually the draft document with incorporated comments, or not now, but next month, excuse me. And you'll have an opportunity to let us know if you're okay with those comments before we send it out to the general public. And then they will have a 30-day public comment period. So there's a lot of different back and forth before it gets finalized. During that, we'll also do an air quality conformity. Since we're actually only a minimal maintenance area, that means that we don't have to do air quality modeling, but we do need to make sure that we're fiscally constrained and we meet with the EPA and Federal Highway, make sure we're meeting their requirements. And we also, once we get the public comments, we'll bring that back to you again, so you can see what they said and make sure that, see if you want to make any other changes to the document before we finalize that. And along with that, we're currently in the process of working with Mountain Metro Transit to come up with a transit plan and a coordinated specialized transit plan, and that's happening right now, and they'll also be doing public comment for that as well, and working with stakeholders in the region to talk about updating for their plan for increased mobility, for availability of services, promote coordination amongst us, and then also the specialized plan is talking about providing more opportunities for paratransit, disabled, and elderly populations as well. And then finally, like John mentioned, in December and January, we're going to bring the final draft to you for review and final approval in January 2020. And that is in hopes that we get final approval by CDOT to incorporate it into their plan, and then also Federal Highway by April, so that we stay in that conformity. And then what happens after the long-range plan is included in it is that there's this connection to our short-range plan, which you've seen me come up and talk about amendments to our transportation improvement program. We'll also be starting a new process to start the next TIP cycle, which will be 2021 or 22 through 24, I think 21. Not sure. But anyways, so that's also a federally required document within our MPO region. It has to be consistent with the long-range plan, developed cooperatively with you all, and then identify the region's priorities for the next 4 years. And that then actually ties projects to money that we have available to the region. And so this is just a quick summary of what we're getting ready to do. We have the Call for Projects workshop this next month. We have the Call for Projects in October. So we'll be working with TAC members to prioritize projects for years 23 and 24. And then we will have a draft that goes to the public as well. And then hopefully final approval in March of 2020. So that's coming up and will be tied to the projects that come directly from this long-range plan. And then as I mentioned, even before you stop with one plan, you start thinking about the long-range plan for the next round. And so a lot of this from the front end starts talking about data analysis and trying to work through the small area forecast and that sort of thing. So probably in late next year, we'll start a next process. So it'll be coming around. And with that, I'm done.
Questions for Catherine?
If I could add one thing real quick, just as a follow-on. It's a big deal for us. This is one of our main responsibilities as a metropolitan planning organization, and we have to get certified by the state and by the feds that we're conducting a proper planning process and addressing all the factors that need to be considered. One of the big things that Catherine mentioned, and John as well, is this fiscal constraint. We can't come up with a plan that anticipates spending more money than is going to come back to the region over that time frame, that 25-year period. So one thing we're going to do is next month, John is going to come back and give a presentation on the transportation revenue forecasting side and show you what that looks like in the long-range plan. So we can drill into that in a little more detail. And just, I guess, a quick hint, what we're going to show is that we're not coming up with enough revenue to pay for what we actually need over that 25-year time frame. There's going to be a pretty significant gap, so there's no surprise there, but we have to show how much money.
I think you need to say spoiler alert.
Well, sorry, he's got plenty of facts and figures to blow your socks off, so it should be pretty interesting. But we've got to show how we're going to pay for maintenance and operations and new capacity on the system. So this is kind of a big deal. So we wanted to make sure that we had a series of presentations. John will talk about revenue forecasting and the funding next month, which is also a prelude to something I wanted to mention. We've been working with the El Pomar Forum for Civic Advancement group, and they've approached us about working with them on a transportation and especially a funding community discussion that is now scheduled, I think, officially for Wednesday, September the 25th, late afternoon, early evening. We'll provide some more details on that as it comes together. But they wanted to, in the context of our long-range plan, wanted to have a community discussion with elected officials and other community leaders about what's happening as far as transportation and what's going on as far as the funding shortfall that we're seeing in our region and statewide. So it's kind of a big deal. It gives us a chance to kind of educate the community around some of the issues that we've been seeing with our long-range plan, especially on the revenue side.
Observations, questions?
Yes,
Neil?
question for you, Andy. Obvious question. we plan and we plan and we plan, and we don't have the money for what we plan for. How can we do better?
Well, if you figure that out, you will have $1 million.
No, I mean, we're obligated by the government to make these plans.
Yeah.
We never have the money to implement them. So is it just me, or are we wasting our time and our money?
We're not wasting our time and our money. It's a great question, and if you can give us 30 days to think about that, and when John gives his presentation next month, we'll have him come back with the answer. It's a process we have to go through, as Catherine alluded to fund a project in the region in our 4-year transportation improvement program. It's got to be in the long-range plan. There's got to be that relationship. But I think it's something that all regions in Colorado for sure are struggling with. We hear this play out at the STAC meetings at the state level every month, that there's not enough money between the urban areas and the rural areas, not enough money for highways versus transit. It's something that we're all dealing with. So I think that's part of why we wanted to have this conversation in September, and then with the El Palmar group, and really educate the community around where those shortfalls come from. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding as far as where transportation funding does come from, and it's not as robust as people tend to think there is. I read an article in the paper just last week about, I think it was the I-24 bypass in Teller County. Why can't we use lottery funds and marijuana tax revenue to pay for stuff like that? Well, we've got a lot of limitations. So I think being able to educate the community about where the money does come from and the strings that are attached and the limitations we have with transportation funding will be a way to kind of start that conversation. But it's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah. Even at Congress, the new bill considers the American Transportation Infrastructure Act, ATIA. It puts the burden on the HTF, the Highway Transportation Fund, which is going to be broken a year. So just things to come. I think, Andy, you had a comment? And then
Well, he actually, the other Andy, kind of covered some of it, but I'll only sum it up and say I'm shocked to hear that there's not enough funds to hit all the projects. But the fiscally constrained plan is one that we've struggled with for all these years that I've been on, and I know it goes way, way back further. But we've always come up with our regional plan, fiscally constrained, that takes a shot at what we think is going to come down the pike. It never pans out, but we kind of have that. And at the same time, we always have the unfunded list, which all of us in the military are very familiar with, an unfunded list, unfunded priorities, so that if money falls out of the sky, which it occasionally does, then you have something ready to roll that you can, drop in there and run for it. But the fiscally constrained is always a challenge, and there's far more requirements, particularly in a fast-growing region such as we have, that is outstripping the ability to fill it. And this is something that, as you mentioned, we see in the stack all the time, that it's stripping out the state.
Just quickly, as a tongue-in-cheek answer to Mayor Levy's question, the answer is we don't have to do it, but we would not get any federal or state funding. So the question is, why do we go through the tremendous resources to satisfy all those requirements and get that funding?
Yeah.
Great question.
Okay. Sharon, then Holly, then Stan. We're on the horn.
I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Catherine. I'll get it eventually. I had one question. When I came to the 2045 long-range specialized transportation meeting this week, I felt like there's some really vital information missing in their presentation. They did, like, this is where we feel the job forecast is now, and it's going to be then, and the population then and now, and things like that. I felt the two pieces of information that were missing was they didn't have the information on this is where the retired population is now, and this is where we anticipate the retired population possibly might live in that time frame. And I think that has great bearing on when we're talking about specialized transportation. Do we anticipate these people staying in their homes and aging in place, which we have all said is the most effective and economical way for people to age, given the cost of moving into assisted living facilities is just skyrocketing, and many of them want to stay in their homes, and we want to see that happen. But we didn't anticipate that in that plan, and I think that's a really big missing piece of it. And also, we have a great number of retired military. It's my understanding up to half that are choosing to stay in this area as they're retiring out. We didn't have that piece of the information of where are they living now, and where are we trying to anticipate they might be. staying as they get out of the military, because we have a huge population down in Widefield and Security, and I anticipate that to continue growing because the housing prices are a little bit better. And so we need to have those populations included in that long-range specialized transportation plan.
Thank you. And I'm not a part of that process necessarily. I know what's going on, but we have MMT as the lead, and John is taking the lead here at PPACG. But I know we have Brian, who I'm sure heard your comment and will incorporate it. And I don't know, John, did you want to say anything?
Brian here?
Brian is here.
Yeah. We'll talk to the consultant and have that information available. It's difficult, and hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm using my projection voice, so I don't have to
Here,
get
we'll
a
share.
microphone. But it's difficult to sort of, we have to be careful what we put out into the public, right? So if we say that this is the area in 2045 that's going to be retirement, a landowner will come and say, why are you putting that label on my land? I have every expectation that I'm going to have that land be zoned for college dorms. You can't do that. So we have to be very careful in any of our information moving forward. But to your point, we certainly have an age breakdown, and we can figure out where, if people are aging in place, where we will have concentrations of senior populations by just doing simple math. So we can do that.
Using the census. I think you can use the census data that we currently have of where the age groups are,
Yes.
of where people are living at this point, and a certain % of them are probably going to stay in place. And I'm sure you have providers like Gail that can help you work with those kind of data. So, all right, thank you.
We'll talk to the consultant.
Yeah, good. Should welcome at this point Commissioner Williams and Commissioner Vanderwerf. I didn't mention it formally, have joined us since our
Thank
introduction.
you.
So, Commissioner Williams.
So I apologize for being late. A couple of just things that maybe we might want to address is our transportation region, the smaller one, transportation, TPR, if Denver is going to consider at some point a tax to do Denver area roads within their transportation planning region, has there been any discussion amongst our transportation region, which includes Pueblo and rural counties as well, that maybe we should consider our own sales tax within our area to do our roads? Because I just don't see Governor Polis looking this direction. Or the state legislature for that matter. I just see them continuing to send money into Denver as opposed to up here, despite our processes. That's the other option is, and this is something that we might want to discuss in later comments, but are we going to consider coming out for or against referendum CC as a board? Because there's no guarantee in that referendum that that money will go to transportation.
Yeah, there is a legislative process, which after we begin a legislative roundtable, we'll mention earlier on, begin on September 4th.
Okay.
So at that point, we can begin to take a position on things like CC.
Okay, thank you.
Stan, do you want to comment, and then Andy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So to Mr. Levy's point about, some of the frustrations we have about building plans, and they're not connected to budgets and so forth, and this produces challenges. It's kind of interesting to me, and it's something that I also dealt with when I was active duty in the military. Nobody has any budget authority even for 2020 because we all vote on our budgets annually. So it really is problematic to build a plan that is truly fiscally constrained because at the point that you build it, you only have this year's dollars. So really a plan, in my mind, is about what you think is appropriate to be done in your area, and it's important for us to build that plan. Within the Department of Defense, they have the FIDIP, Fiscal Year Development Plan. It's a 10-year projection that is not fiscally constrained. It's an expression of all of the requirements that they have, and often the numbers that they have in there are more than they ultimately receive from Congress annually. So as time marches on, this gets squeezed down into something that's more realistic fiscally as you get close to that budgeting year. And at the budgeting year, that's when rubber meets the road. But in the Department of Defense, the FIDIP was an expression of needs. And for our plan, I think it's an expression of needs that are not necessarily fiscally constrained, that I think is very, very important for us to express to CDOT and the legislature about what we believe we have as requirements in our community to have a healthy community. And they're not necessarily fiscally constrained. So it's immensely frustrating because we know many times we don't get those dollars. But if we don't express that need, my sense of it is we would end up losing out. Thank you.
Andy?
Well, I just want to address something that Commissioner Williams mentioned. I think we have a regional tax already, which is a PPRTA. Now, it's not a TPR-wide or even a county-wide, but...
And I was asking specifically TPR-wide.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, but I think since we already have the PPRTA, in fact, Denver really is copying us. So I'm not quite sure I want to get into the leapfrog of copying us. And they also have a transit tax that funds their transit system separately on top of that. So it's kind of a race to the pie. That would be, and, I don't think we would be at least some of us probably would not be very supportive of adding another one unless we were to expand the current one geographically.
Discussion we've had at STAC is that roads go beyond simply maintenance of asphalt. We're going to building to purpose. That purpose is affected not only by geography, it's also affected by technology, by autonomous vehicles, by the ability of, for example, aging at home. Lots of things are affecting what roads will look like even. How much can we compress traffic based on if your new car today will monitor the distance with the car ahead of you. Well, would that result in greater compression? Lots of things go into this complicated math that our planners have to go through. So it can't appear on the short-range plan unless in the long-range plan. Any other comments or discussion? Really, really good information this morning. Anything else, Catherine? Okay, thank you very much. Move on to item 6B, the Transportation Improvement Program Policies and Procedures, TIP. It's also Catherine?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Catherine Wenger, Transportation Planner. So over the last few months, we've been working with our TAC group to update our Transportation Improvement Program, or our TIP policies and procedures. This occurs pretty much with every cycle of a new TIP, just to make sure that we're all in agreement with how we want to conduct the development and how we want any modifications that may occur. So John and I and the rest of the department have worked through and kind of adjusted the TIP policies and procedures to make it a little, to adjust the flow, to make it a little bit more readable and to more clear. We didn't change a lot of the document. We just organized it differently and kind of gave it numeration so that if you had a policy, you could call it out by its number, making it a little easier that way. So there are some items that we suggested for addition, and we worked with the TAC to kind of clarify and narrow that down to what they felt was reasonable policies. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of the major changes. One was to talk about clarifying the difference between an amendment and a modification. The amendments are formal amendments that we bring to to our committee members and for approval, and these are major changes such as a large scope change or a change in federal funding. And then there's also the administrative modifications that are small adjustments that do not come to the board. And so we worked through some clarifications there. And then also we created an unscheduled pool for projects for years 5 through 10. And this aligns with what CDOT's doing as a 10-year program. Years 5 through 10 will be fiscally constrained, but they're not going to be technically scheduled. They're just for planning purposes, and so that we know what's coming down the pipeline as priorities, and maybe if a project has pre-construction funds, then we know that that project's also going to need construction funds down the road. And so those are some major changes that we've highlighted in the TIP policies and procedures. And we are bringing this for information this month and then for action and approval for next month.
Catherine, in your memo, you indicated you'd like comments by August 5th. What would you like the real date to be?
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe that was probably September. Oh.
That'd be a Thursday.
Yes.
which is fine.
Okay.
September 5th, okay.
I believe it's September 5th. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, Kathy? Charlie?
Just a quick comment on the labeling of your policies that you've delineated. You have PO. I might encourage you to add tip PO to that, because I could imagine these policies floating up to board memos and such, and not sure that we'd automatically understand that PO 8.1 is related to the tip. It may be, bylaw reference. It may be some sort of other citation, so it might help us to keep those citations straight.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, Catherine? Thank you very much. Item 6C, Transit Report from Councilmember Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we got myself, Sharon, John Leosadas, Andy Gunning, and Brian Batuli, as well as Craig. We got together and I was like, what is a transit rep? What do we do? And so I wanted to get clear on what we did. So we produced a report, which is in your packet, of what's going on. And the big thing is to amplify and to make sure transit is, although we're just a small percent of the budget, we want to make sure that we're noticed and that we're there. And I notice the transit comes up even with the presentations, but I think it needs to have its own little space. So I'm going to ask people that were there to assist me. We talked about being in alignment with the 45-year the plan for 2045, and I think Brian spoke about that. Brian, could you help out? Is he here?
Brian Batuli is coming to the microphone.
He's on his way up, and just to fill some space here, we're going to do this on a quarterly basis. There's a transit rep position that's on the PPACG board, and we're just trying to give it a little more structure, make it a little more formal, I guess, and pull this same group together between the city, MMT, City of Fountain, because they're a transit provider as well, and John and I will help assist that, and talk about what's going on as far as transit planning activities and how we can get that more connected to what's going on throughout PPACG, and then report back on those meetings that we have on a quarterly basis, just to kind of keep it on the forefront and let you know what's going on. Right?
Yeah.
Good morning. Brian Batuli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit. Brian Batuli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit. Yes, thank you, Councilmember Avila. So we talked about several items, how often to meet, what the purpose of meeting would be, regional coordination throughout the PPACG area and relating specifically to transit. And that's when we got into talking about the 2045 regional transit plan and the specialized transportation plan. And Sharon alluded to that. We did have our first stakeholder meeting on Monday. Very well attended, very well organized, and a lot of good input from all the stakeholders. So that's about a 6-month process. That's time to correspond for incorporation into PPACG's regional transportation plan. So it's a coordinated effort, as is doing both the specialized and the transit plan together, using one consultant team, one public outreach team to conduct both processes. And when appropriate, we hope to have some public outreach, public meeting efforts in combination with PPACG. We're asking an awful lot of the public. There are 4 or 5 really large efforts going on in the region here at the same time. Add to that the statewide effort, and it can lead to public meeting fatigue. So the easiest that we can make it for our public to comment, the better. Councilmember Avila?
Thank you, Brian. I know I put you on the spot.
That's okay.
I apologize for that. But, we talked about, the number of buses that Fountain has, the number of buses we have, how we can make that more fluid. And we talked about some of the transient challenges that we have in terms of the military and of the colleges, UCCS in particular. So, and how that's going to work. And one of the things that, for me personally, and what I'd like to work on is that there's a lot of action going on near the Air Force Academy with the city. There's with the visitor center, and I've been thinking I represent Southeast, and that's transit is used a lot in my district. And Fort Carson is, in the southeast part of town, which affects Fountain as well as southeast Colorado Springs. And we want to figure out how we can incorporate the welcome package that Fort Carson, the soldiers receive, or the active duty personnel. Like in my neighborhood, there are it's of young families, and I live in a really long cul-de-sac, and I will have 2 or 3 young families there for a couple of years until they get their next assignment. So I want to make sure and figure out a way how I can work with Fort Carson in making that transition, and this being home while we're here, and have every available service, especially transit. And so those are the things that I highlighted on. And then we've got some action items that we're going to look more into specialized transit, and we're going to be looking at the trends for how the colleges, Colorado College, UCCS, and Pikes Peak Community College are using the service and what that looks like. But I think it was a really good meeting with everyone, and so like Brian said, we are going to keep you updated quarterly. And so does anybody have any questions?
Just a comment, Councilmember, was it just a few weeks ago, the governor of Colorado sat in this chair, and we had the director of CDOT and the director of the military community, Major General Lowe, comment about transit for veterans. So it's got some attention, not just here, but all the way at state level. So we're continuing to work on that issue with more meetings to come on that topic. So we got a lot of help, I think, on the topic. Thanks for taking the leadership on this. Any other comments, questions for the group on transit? Thank you, Elena.
You're welcome.
Next is item 6D, air quality and ozone update.
Samantha is going to provide an
Yes,
update.
Good morning. Welcome back. Yeah, there's nothing.
Hi, I'm Samantha Bailey. I'm the environmental planner here at PPACG. I just started here in May. My first presentation to the board was last month, so I wanted to give you just a quick update on a variety of different data. And because I'm going to be talking a little bit about different pieces of data, I presented to you an infographic, just something for you to follow along with. So in case you get lost, or if I'm talking too fast, or whatever you need, the information's there. So right now our main concern here is ozone, since we're close to going above the EPA regulated standard. Earth-level ozone is a pollutant caused by a reaction of volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxides, and sunlight. Causes can come from gas emissions, energy industries, and wildfires. There are 2 ozone air monitors in the Pikes Peak region, one in Manitou Springs and one at the U.S. Air Force Academy. On the infographic, I show that the highest ozone date this summer was on June 6th, with Manitou reading at its highest concentration at 70 parts per billion, and the U.S. Air Force Academy at 69 parts per billion. This doesn't mean that even though that the standard for EPA is greater than 70 parts per billion, the actual standard that EPA takes is actually a rolling average. So currently, our regional air quality standard remains at 69 parts per billion for our average standard. So we are not yet over EPA exceedance, which is good. As I mentioned, EPA standard is a 3-year rolling average of the 4th highest concentration, and then averaged out with the last 3 years of the 4th highest standard. So I have a good feeling that this summer, with how mild our climate has been, that we won't potentially go above standard just yet, but the ozone season does go into September, so there is that potential chance. Because of that, I also listed that we have had 20 Action Day alerts for the Pikes Peak region. An Action Day alert isn't a notification of going above EPA standard. It's a set notification by the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment when the air quality index goes to moderate, so I believe that's at 50 parts per billion. That's just to inform the public, especially with residents that may have sensitivities to air pollution, that the air quality is not so good that day. So we've had 20 of those so far. And if you flip to the back side, it talks about outreach efforts that I've conducted since the last meeting. I post for every Ozone Action Day, so along with those posts and the Air Aware video campaign that we've been doing, we've definitely been making a lot of outreach efforts through social media. Councilmember Jill Gabler's Air Aware video actually reached the most users on our Facebook page with over 490 views. And then 15 air quality posts have been created since the last time I met with you. Each post that we put in our Facebook, I link to our website, and I think because of that, since July 9th, we've had 116 page views to our air quality page on ppacg.org. And in between all of those posts, I have done 4 news interviews, including one in-person interview on Fox News. And then I've met with 15 different partners in relation to air quality. So this work is definitely keeping me really busy. As for next steps, I am working on updating the Air Quality Technical Committee so we can become even more effective. I'm looking at potential projects that we can conduct, adding new members, things like that. And I hope to report that out to you in the next few months, what this Air Quality Technical Committee could potentially look like. I also plan on doing more education and outreach. As I mentioned earlier, the ozone season ends at around September. I don't want to stop this movement that we have going on, though. I do plan on reaching out with more local news stations, working with partners, especially now that we're coming towards the end of the year. I want to start developing outreach strategies for 2020, along with working with this potentially new air quality technical committee on projects for 2020 as well. So start strategic planning on potential projects as well as outreach strategies.
Questions or comments for Samantha? Yes. Andy.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate all the updates that have been coming out. I saw a couple articles over the last several weeks that talked about the air quality and addressed this, and made the statement, and I don't know if it's true or not, that we had half as many Action Day alerts as last year. So is that indicating improvement?
Yes. Yes. So what Andy is referring to is that there was a news article that came out that compared last year's data to this year. I believe at the end of July last year, we already had over 30 Ozone Action Day alerts. So the fact that we're at 20 in the beginning of August is a really good sign. So as I mentioned earlier, I think it's because we've had a milder summer. Rain definitely breaks up the sunlight, and as I mentioned earlier, ozone is a reaction from the sunlight. So yeah, really good improvement.
Yeah, it's very heavily weather dependent.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
It was very hot and dry last summer, if you'll recall. So we felt the consequences. So Mother Nature's been on our side so far this year.
Okay. Stan? And then
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate also the information you've got here. But this is on ozone, and there are other pollutants, and I don't know if you've been reporting on those or have data on those or are planning to report on those. Some of those include just particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide as some of the most common forms of pollutants. So do we have sensors that are checking those, or do we not report on those because we're always really, really low or something? Okay, looks like Mr. Pico has some response to that at least.
I do, but if you can go first, it's fine.
Well, we have a number of monitors out there that monitors around the power plant so that we can measure all those requirements, but that's focused on ensuring that we're
On the power plant.
on the power plants. If you have a broader, that'd be great, but we're well under every other measure.
Okay, so.
Substantially. This is the only one there's even close.
This tends to be the one that we will hear a lot of reporting on because we are a long way from busting the EPA standards on the other ones. This is the one we're close to.
No news is good news.
Okay.
Yeah. The other, for example, SOx and NOx are both less than a third of what the required standard are. So we're in very good shape on all of those. This is the only one, but this is also the one that will hurt us the most.
But you've been into this very deeply because you called it SOx and NOx. See, I use
sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide, yeah.
And you use the local name. I thought, well, okay,
Well,
that's pretty cool.
it's playing with a power plant. So,
But that's the reason why we don't get reporting on the others, because we're well within
because
the
we're
standards.
well
This is the
within,
one we're close to.
Yeah, well within the standards, and this is the one that will hurt us the most.
Okay, that answers my
Because,
question.
yeah, if we bust it, then we get to have lots of fun, because the biggest component is the vehicles, transportation. It's over 80% of the ozone contributing, or I'm not saying this right, but the components that cause this are transportation related.
Okay.
So that's where the focus comes in. But of course, they'll come in there and EPA will hit everybody and say, what are you doing all? But it's from this that we all had our emissions testing requirement.
And one last comment, but I think you had mentioned it once before. It's just, once in a while, I have an interest in how do we compare with other parts of Colorado. You probably have that data as well.
I do. I can certainly present that at the next meeting. I do want to mention, too, that at the end of the year, I would like to make this an annual occurrence of doing a yearly data trends report. So whether it looks like this infographic or whatever, but I do plan on reporting that data out to you at the end of the year. To all pollutants, not just ozone.
Right. There's, I think, 6 regulated
Yes.
pollutants that we have to be responsible for EPA. So we'll do an end-of-the-year report. But part of the conversation, too, about ozone is the rest of the North Range is in non-attainment, which is a big deal. We're right on the edge, so that's why we have a really single-minded focus on ozone right now, since we're just teetering on the edge. But the Denver metro area and the North Front Range up into Weld and Larimer County are already in non-attainment, and has some serious implications on how you can do your transportation planning, the funding process you have to go through for project approval and things like that.
Thank you.
Yes, I just want to acknowledge and thank Samantha for joining us last night. Our city council considered a comprehensive climate change resolution, which basically spells out about 14 different actions that we hope to take and strategies over the next 15 to 20 years. Our city council is committed to trying to do something, but we also recognize that what we do is a very small piece. And what we really need to do is work on this regionally. So what I'd like to suggest, we had one of the things that we're going to do this year is one of our initiatives is plant trees. And for those of you that don't know, planting trees is an important part of reducing air pollution, reducing ozone and so forth. So that's something that we can do. We can we're trying to work with, there was just an article today in our newspaper in the Gazette about our working with our school district. We're trying to get kids involved. And I think if the region comes together to do that, it potentially can make a difference. It's a small step, but collectively we can make a big impact. And so I'd be glad to work with anybody. We have draft resolutions for city council and commissions to consider. I saw that Colorado Springs, Richard Scorman, came out and suggested that they'd like to plant 1,871 trees. If you don't know that number, that's how old, that's the incorporation of Colorado Springs. We are planning to plant 147 trees. We thought that was a little bit more doable for us, which celebrates our 147th birthday. If all of the communities in the region come together, we would celebrate and plant 995 trees, each doing our own little part. So I'd be glad to work with other communities if you'd like to take this on in any way. Appreciate that. And thank you, Samantha, for joining us last night.
Neil? Ken, it might help if you could email all of us, keep us in the loop of those 14 items, just so we can take a look at them on our own.
I was actually planning on doing that after last night. I need to make sure our council was on board to move forward with that, and I'd be glad to get that out. Absolutely.
Okay.
Other comments for Samantha? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
that.
much.
Strategic Plan Quarterly Progress Report, I think, Andy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be fairly brief, and Jessica, feel free to help out, jump in if I forget anything. But this is our second quarter report on progress we're making on the board strategic plan that you adopted the end of last year. Not going to go through it in detail, but you've got a summary of some of the key things we've been working on under each one of the strategic objectives that the board adopted. And I just want to highlight a couple of things real briefly. One of the objectives, first one was advocacy, to serve as an effective advocacy voice on common ground issues and specifically to become a convener on community issues. I think a great example of that is the session that you mentioned already, Mr. Chairman, last month that we held with the governor and the CDOT executive director and the head of the military affairs.
General Lowe?
Yes, General Lowe, for a roundtable discussion around transportation needs for our military and veterans community. And we're going to continue that discussion as well with a number of things we'll be working on. Under information sharing objectives, that was another key one that you adopted last year, and we're doing a lot of work in that regard. And I think now that we're fully staffed with technology staff members and GIS staff, we're going to finally engage with the jurisdictions on creating a kind of an information sharing database that we can all rely on across jurisdictional boundaries that has GIS information, plans, and other documents that the jurisdictions have adopted, so we're really kind of diving into that to scope that out. Another thing we're working on in that regard is we're coordinating with DRCOG to use a shared TIP database. We talked about the TIP, Transportation Improvement Program, earlier this morning, and we're actually going to, we've been in need for an electronic database to track our TIP projects for quite some time. Found that DRCOG has just what we're looking for, so we're going to partner with them on creating a database down here that we can use. Whole series of other things we're doing in the aging and transportation arenas. Not going to get into in detail, but do want to mention two things under aging that we've been working on. One is that we really are taking advantage of more technology with our Medicare and Social Security outreach events that we hold. We're now holding live webinars, something that we haven't done before. We've basically required folks to come to our office if they want to learn about Medicare and Social Security, so we're now using webinars to push the information out, and had a really successful one last month around Social Security, so we're going to be doing more of that. And final one I wanted to mention under senior issues is that we've been working on and submitted a grant application for Sunshine Home Shares to bring a senior housing option, housing sharing option to the Springs area. So we're now kind of getting involved in senior/housing affordability needs, and we'll talk more about that if the grant comes through. But appreciate the direction we've gotten in the strategic plan. It really gives us some good focus, and we'd like to talk much more about this as we develop our work plan for 2020 and our budget for next year. So I'm looking forward to maybe setting aside some time in your maybe October or November meeting agenda so we can dive into this in more detail. But happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just really appreciate, Andy, the staff's attention to make a strategic plan an action plan, something that's not sitting on the shelf, something that gives direction, purpose, and actually things are moving. So thank you to you and your staff. It's been great to see things happen. Appreciate that. Other comments, questions? All right, we'll move on to bylaws update, and I think Jessica.
That's why I keep hiding up and down. Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. This is an information about the bylaws update. When we did the CAC bylaws update in May, one of the things that came up is there are several other committee bylaws that have some discrepancies. How exactly they describe meeting notifications, how exactly they specify what words are used to specify officers and those things. And as the bylaws committee got together, they realized this, and so we suggested that there be a major change. Now, none of those are substantial in any way. Simply, it is correcting the font to be universal, ensuring that the public meeting notice notifications align, ensuring that all of the bylaws have a conflict of interest section, only some did, and that section says, Section 1, announcing conflict. Whenever a board, committee, or subcommittee member has cause to believe that a matter to be voted upon would involve him or her in a conflict of interest, He or she shall announce the conflict of interest and request a ruling by the committee on voting on such matters. And Section 2, abstention from voting. No member shall vote on any matter which would involve a conflict of interest. That did exist in a few of our board and committee bylaws, but not in all of them. We have now ensured that it's in all of them. And the other thing that we have done is made all of the articles, organizations, to be universal. We wanted to make sure that you could look at any bylaws and know exactly where you were switching to very easily. The part of this that is actually interesting to all of you, so that item is an information item. We will be taking that to all of the boards to make sure nobody's got any huge objections, just letting them know, because we do want to make sure we're not changing any bylaws without giving our committees a chance to say something. So they will all have an option to look at it throughout the August meetings. They'll have a 30-day time period to comment on it, so this will come back to you in the October meeting. Part of that bylaws subcommittee was also looking at one other thing. That one other thing was a request to have a staff member represent the municipality to serve as a proxy. That discussion will be happening with the bylaws committee, and if you are interested in that discussion and engaging in it at that committee level, the meeting on the staff proxy discussion is August 30th at 11 a.m. here at PPACG in our upstairs conference room. So again, if you are interested in that discussion, reviewing the request to allow staff to vote in place of their elected officials, that discussion is August 30th at 11 a.m.
Just to clarify, you're talking about on this board or on
Yes,
committees?
this board.
This board.
Just for this board. This board's current bylaws specify that only elected officials may vote. And there was a request by one of our municipalities to see if we would take into consideration the full-time work schedules of their elected officials and allow a full-time staff person instead to attend and vote for that municipality. That person will be there to present at the bylaws discussion on August 30th.
That's why it's an invitation to come, modifying the membership of this board of directors. Right. Okay. I'm going to ask, if kind of put you a little bit in the spot here, Jessica, if you could give us a quick update on the legislative roundtable and that line of meeting and how we're heading in that direction, if I could do that to you.
Thank you all for calling me out on that.
Sure.
So September the 4th at 3 o'clock, we'll be doing our regular legislative roundtable. This is a time for the legislators to talk to us about how their review of the last session and their plans for the next session, and more importantly, for our board members to have a chance to talk to our regional elected officials about what priorities we see, what needs we see, and what our highlights of our region's focuses for the upcoming legislative session are, so we can share that with all of them. Again, this is September the 4th at 3 p.m., and the special part that you need to write down is Library 21C. This will not be here in the PPACG conference room. This will be at Library 21C. We do invite all of our federal legislative offices to attend as well, and we do invite all committee members of PPACG to attend in the audience so that everyone has the chance to hear directly from our legislators and from our board members. And our military partners. Anyone who gets an email from us for any purpose got an email from me with an invitation, and I do hope that you all choose to attend.
Last year, we really had, I thought, a very genuine, engaging discussion. Probably the first time, this is our second year for doing this, right? With engaging our legislative staff, and it ties directly into our strategic plan, being a greater advocate for our member governments, being more cohesive in how we think and how we can advocate on behalf of our region. So this is one of those big pieces moving forward, and this is the first step for the 2020 legislative year. So please come if you can. Please put it on your schedule and bring a list. bring a list of ideas, how you want to engage our legislators. Thank you.
And I will add in that if you do have a lobbyist or legislative effort within your individual municipality, please make sure to give them the opportunity to chime in, write a note, make sure that we can give handouts to our elected officials with information from each of our individual municipalities, as well as engage in the discussion with all of PPACG on the regional level.
And just a note on scope, this would be a PPCG focus. If you have individual members just for your own regions, feel free to, of course, engage your legislator directly on your region. But we're looking for something that would apply broadly across our 16-member governments coming up. Good. Any other comments, questions? All right, we'll move on then to our military reports. Who would like to start?
Good morning. I'll start.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Tom Falls-Ronham again. I've been at Peterson now as the wing commander and base commander for a month. But,
Welcome.
But I've been here in the community for about 30 years, so off and on. So no stranger to this community, and thank you for what the council does. Peterson is an incredibly active place right now, as all of you know. So I hope to share some of that with you on the 25th of September when I do the annual State of the Wing address and capture some of that. Too much to go into, obviously, here in a few minutes. Right now, we're anticipating, originally the date was the 6th of September. We hear maybe it could move slightly, but United States Space Command, so the next combatant command, and as all of you know, General Raymond was confirmed to be that commander. And so we think there'll be a ceremony on or about that first week of September, and look forward to seeing many of you there as we'll host that on Peterson. And word right now is that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Chairman Dunford, will be the presiding official for that. So that should be a big event here in Colorado Springs. The basing decision for United States Space Command, which I know many of you are interested in, and actually all of you are interested in, and tracking, originally was projected to come out in right about now, and we're hearing probably in the October timeframe. So no surprise as we go through all the the public comment period and the legal and political processes to make sure that's done properly. We're looking forward to hearing something in the October timeframe regarding that final basing decision for United States Space Command. Appreciate all the work on and the progress on the East Gate. So that's been fantastic, and the continued progress. And then, of course, we're continuing to watch the Powers and Airport interchange there as the increased commercial activity starts to take root, and we'll see how that plays out over the next weeks and months to come. But that's it. Thank you.
Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, Ron Jeffrey from Shreveport Air Force Base. Just a couple of items to mention. The first, the 3rd Space Experimentation Squadron Weapons and Tactics Flight was named the Air Force Association's 2019 General George C. Kenney Award winners for lesson learned. This Air Force level award recognized the 3rd SES Weapons and Tactics Flight for excellence in capturing both lessons learned and tactics, techniques, and procedures related to experimentation activities from the 1st of January in 2018 to the 31st of December in 2018. The AFA invited the 3rd SES Weapons and Tactics team to receive this award at their annual AFA conference on 16 September in the Washington, D.C. area. So we're looking forward to our folks receiving that award and recognition. Team Shreveport will participate in a front range exercise taking place next week. The exercise brings various Shreveport and front range elements together in a coordinated effort to test their mission readiness. We don't anticipate any impacts on the surrounding communities. Shreveport celebrated summertime with our annual Summer Slam on the 19th of July. This is our largest morale, welfare, and recreation event for the year, and the day was a big success. There were local vendors, animals to pet and ride, games, food and entertainment for the entire team at Shreveport Air Force Base and their families. We certainly appreciate the support of the communities and folks that made that event a great success. And unless there are any questions, that's all I've got from Shreve Air Force Base.
Any questions for Ron? Hal?
Good morning.
Good morning.
A couple things this morning from Fort Carson. One is Major General George should be back this week. I'm not quite sure when he lands. Maybe he's already here. I haven't seen him yet, though. But he's back from a 9-month deployment, our commanding general, and his change of command is for October. So he'll be changing out with Major General McFarland, who will be taking over as our commanding general at Carson. 3rd Armored Brigade combat team is still overseas in Afghanistan. They should be coming back all before Thanksgiving. I think part of the advance party will come back around Halloween, and then the rest of them should be flowing back throughout the month of November. So that's good news for us. And at that point, pretty much everyone's back at Fort Carson for a period of time. I think the next unit that might deploy this next year would be the 4th Combat Aviation Brigade. That would be leaving out probably in the springtime. The only other thing I'd mention this morning is the environmental assessment for the high altitude aviation training has been put on the public website by the Bureau of Land Management. They're running the NEPA effort there to look at environmental impacts to that operation, and so that's out for the public comment. I think the comment period ends the 11th of September. It affects, there are landing sites, I think 43 is the number, landing sites in the EA for Park, Teller, and Fremont County. So if you haven't heard about that and want to share that with others, it's out there for public comment. And I think that's it from Fort Carson this morning.
Where would we find that link or to make comments?
It's the Bureau of Land Management website. I would just try that. I haven't actually seen it, but they're the ones that put it out there, so BLM.
Okay, I'll get that up to Teller. Thank you. Okay, Colonel Bearden, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. On behalf of General Severi and your United States Air Force Academy, it's a pleasure to give you a quick update on a few things. One, you may have seen in the news, we recently received our accreditation back from the Higher Learning Commission, just a revalidation. That's a 10-year effort. And so that was received with no comments, which is the absolute best outcome that you can get with that. And so we remain accredited for the next 10 years, and we're excited about that and all that that means for our faculty and our students. In addition, recently our newest group of cadets completed basic cadet training, and so now about 1,200 added back to the ranks, which is wonderful. It's great to have them back in class and have all that energy and excitement back on the campus. And then finally, the last thing I would mention is upcoming the 30th of August through the 1st of September is Parents' Weekend. And so that Saturday will be the parade as well as our first home football game. That is important for the community to be aware of, as we expect our attendance, although we won't be at capacity, we expect our attendance at that game to push 35,000, so that will come with traffic and hotel impacts in the local area. Pending any of your questions, that's your update from the Air Force Academy.
Thank you. Terry, anything this morning?
Interesting, Air Force plays CU at CU this year. The last time we went to that game, we were in fights with everybody, so it's going to be interesting to see how that goes this time. The Military Affairs Council is in a nominating process for their next board, which starts in January. You have to be a member of the chamber to be a representative on the Military Affairs Council. And my term is up. I don't have a job anymore, so I'm not eligible. But I'll be done in December.
Wow. Scared that people are picking fights with the United States Air Force. That's okay. Thank you. We'll move on to Mobility Coordinating Committee report. Chairman Gray.
Good morning, everybody. Miley Gray. I'm chair of the Mobility Coordinating Committee, and you all have the meeting minutes, so I won't bore you with the details. I just wanted to let you know a couple things. One is that we're updating the mobility guide, which is a small pocket guide for, really everybody who is interested in just having phone numbers at the tip of their hand. for them to be able to access mobility in our community for disabled and older citizens. And that's really exciting because it hasn't been done since 2016, so more to come on that. And I also wanted you to know that we're going to be skipping the September meeting because everybody on the Mobility Coordinating Committee is encouraged to attend a statewide COSTA conference, and don't ask me what that stands for, but it has to do with Colorado Specialized Transportation.
Colorado Association of State Transit Authorities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, my gosh, because I could not remember it at all. It just said, and I was hoping it was spelled out in the minutes, but it's not. Anyway, so that is September 24th to 27th, and so look it up if you're interested in attending. Otherwise, we'll be having a next meeting on August 27th, which just happens to be my wedding anniversary of like nearly 40 years. And also then our next meeting will be October 22nd. Anyone is welcome to come. Any questions?
Any questions for Miley?
He knows what the acronym stands for. Ask him again.
COSTA,
Yeah, I got it.
Colorado Association of State Transit Authorities.
I'm going to write that down.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Very good. Welcome. Thank you. Transportation Advisory Committee, quick update. I'll give that one. The major body of the presentation at the last statewide transportation meeting was on the Front Range Rail Commission. You may know that Joe Gabler is the statewide chair of that organization. The presentation was made by Randy Gredinger. He is the program director. It's a fifth Senate Bill 1 last year provided funds to establish this commission to study the need and what it would look like to do a range of transit operations along the Front Range. The corridor from Pine, Wyoming down to Pueblo contains 85% of the statewide population and most of the growth. The legislature has appropriated funds. There's a 5-year plan to roll out everything from defining a mission down to the year 15 objective is to open the service in whatever that may look like. Might be bus rapid transit, might be light passenger rail, might even be high-speed rail. The price tags vary from the hundreds of millions up to the $15 billion mark for a range of options for high-speed rail in the Front Range. A lot more to follow. I was kind of hoping that Jill would be this morning and give a little update, but beyond that, but any other members, John, any comments you'd like to make on
Can I mention
that?
one real thing
Sure.
real quick before John dives in? I was looking at my notes from the STAC meeting last month as well, and I recall that they mentioned that there's a public survey that's open for about a 2-month period, and I'll send the link out for that.
Okay.
It might be something that folks want to definitely weigh in on and provide their perspectives on. But yeah, it's around the Front Range Rail passenger options that the state's looking at, so we'll get the survey link out this afternoon.
Very good. Kind of a big deal in Colorado. John?
And Mr. Chair and members of the board, on a related note to the Front Range Rail Commission, they have hired a consultant. It's HDR, and they're starting their process by which they're going out, and we're looking to our friends at CDOT to see if we can get a presentation here in September 11th, your September 11th meeting, to talk about what that study is and to the extent it's going to go in moving the study forward. In addition, I know that there will probably be consultants reaching out to at least the city of Colorado Springs and El Paso County, because when you look at the map, the statewide map and the swath by which the study area goes, those particular jurisdictions may be contacted directly, and I would definitely recommend that is something that if you can schedule that you do that, because again, there's going to be a lot of information. To the extent we can work with CDOT and HDR to cover things here at the board meetings, we'll certainly do that, so all the information gets disseminated. Mm-hmm. But to the extent that there might be some individual meetings, that's up to you guys.
Yeah. So this is the next tectonic plate kind of moving through the area, Front Range Rail. Move slowly. We'll see if it actually can get to its objective, but it's a big deal.
We do have trains that kind of go through the whole center of mountains.
Yeah. I mentioned that in terms of scope, not in speed, okay? Maybe it's speed, too. Any other comments? Let me just also mention that the STAC board, also the STAC committee, approved a schedule change. For the last several years, we've met on the fourth Friday in the morning at CDOT headquarters. That schedule moved to the second Friday, beginning in January. So if you'd like to join us for STAC, those are all open meetings beginning in January. That'd be the second Friday. Yes. Not quite yet. Yeah. Any of the comments, Andy or John, on any attended from STAC comments?
Well, no, not specifically. I know you touched on that, and I think it's important to emphasize that it's a study right now.
Yes.
To figure out the options.
Yes.
The top of the line exceeds the state budget, I think. So, we'll
$15 billion is about half the total entire state budget. That's correct. But
So it remains to be seen how this plays out over the years. But it's it's interesting because, as pointed out, that's 85% of the state population in that corridor.
But FTA money, Federal Transit Authority money, would be a big part of that.
It would be.
Go
So,
there.
but nevertheless, it's so people don't get too wound up through the ceiling. It's a study right now to figure out what the options are.
Yeah, yeah. Neil, and then Bruce? Or Bruce? Okay, I'm sorry. Bruce? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Is this study a brand new study? Because I thought the state did something back in the 90s. They were doing developing a master plan for rail and busing and stuff throughout the state between Longmont and Pueblo.
Yeah, there were a number of studies, great time and effort, and all that body of evidence is being pulled into the single study, so they're bringing everything forward. Absolutely. Andy?
Sorry, one last item I want to mention, STAC-related. There was some discussion about the CMAQ funds, congestion management, air quality mitigation funds, and probably more drama than necessary, but thanks to CDOT, working with, John worked with them, and with Dr. Cog, the CMAQ funds for this year, for 2020, are now available for the projects that have been approved in our TIP, so appreciate everybody's support in helping to make that happen. But, yeah, there was some discussion around that as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad you phrased it that way, that there was more drama than, it was entertaining.
But, yes. Yes. All right, we'll move on then to Community Advisory Committee, and who do we have representing this morning? Sure.
Okay. This will be really short. I would like to thank you for your vote for our new member. That was under the consent agenda. And also thank you for approving NEPCO. And that's basically all I have, so it'll be short. Thank you.
All right, good. And I've just, let me correct myself, the Transportation Advisory Committee was 7C. John, I'm going to mention that, please. I jumped the gun on the staff report, which is actually 7G, but just eager.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chair, members of the board, again, I know this report is earth-shattering, and you probably would have been able to sleep if we didn't cover it. So we wanted to make sure we went back and hit the item. I'm here for Brandy Williams. She had a City of Fountain commitment, so she was unable to be here. So she asked me to cover the item for her. On the TAC agenda, we had the TIP policies and procedures, which you saw today as an action item. We had an interesting presentation from CDOT Bustang and their consultant, I believe is HDR, where they're looking at expanding the Bustang routes and gathering information. So at this point, that is still in the information gathering stage, and so we'll probably see these proposed Bustang Outrider routes coming back in the near future. And then finally, there was a discussion on the TIP's obligation deadlines. So with that, is there any questions that anyone might have?
From the TAC. Question of the TAC? Seeing none, thank you, John. Regional Advisory Council. Who do we have representing today?
Oh, he was on the
yeah, Joe, behind me.
Joe Urban, Area Agency on Aging.
Yeah.
You have the report in front of you, the minutes in front of you. We want to thank the folks, good folks of Aspen Mine Center and Cripple Creek for hosting us last month. It was a great meeting and good public response as well. But I'd answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Joe? See none. Good. Thank you, Joe. Executive Director's Report. Welcome back, Annie. Took a little time off. I'm glad to see you back. Yes. It's rain. It's this kind of a team event this morning, so thank you. Bearing with me.
Good
Jen
morning.
Ferguson, our North Program Engineer. Thank you.
Good morning. Standing in for Karen Rowe, Director.
Great.
Just a little bit of introduction myself. I just became North Program Engineer here within the past 3 weeks. Been with CDOT for over 7 years, and in the private sector prior to that, close to 11 years. Primarily, my background is structural design with roadway emphasis as well. Get into some reports on current construction projects. US 24 surface treatment and bridge repairs. That's continuing on. We're hoping to have a lot of the surface treatment work done this fall. You'll still expect lane closures at night along US 24. The ramp metering project along I-25 has begun on South Academy. We're constructing ramp metering facilities on 12 locations along I-25. We expect to have that up and running by probably February of next year. The cable barrier project south of Colorado Springs on I-25 is still moving forward. We hope to have that constructed and completed by mid-November. And the ITS project along US 24 is still under construction, but look to be completed likely in November as well. Welcome to open up for questions.
Yeah, I just want to welcome you to the team. You've hit the ground running. Mark Andrews' shoes were big to fill, but we appreciate your partnership and engaging our board here. So
absolutely,
very good. Sharon.
I really appreciated the weekly update and the ability to put the exact work times and things out on Facebook for people to see about the cabling project so they could adjust their times. So, and, suggesting people get off at exit 132 rather than go down to 128 because the traffic, that backs up. So thank you. Thank you very much. That would be really great to continue getting those weekly updates. I know the citizens that have been working on that for a long time were thrilled to have that update. So that would be nice to be able to do that.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yep, Stan.
Yes, thank you. Also, welcome, and thanks for being part of our team here. For the board, I just wanted to let you all know, I may have mentioned this once before, but I've been working with CDOT on an alternative configuration option for the gap for Highway 25, and this is a 4-lane concept. It's the primary way to do that is to utilize the inside emergency lane as the toll lane to turn on and off, just like CDOT does on eastbound I-70. What I have heard from Shoshana Liu, the CDOT director, and other members of CDOT is that the proposal does have merit. They have an interest in it. But the latest I had heard from Ms. Liu is that there are some components of the gap where they don't actually have all of that width necessary in order to go through with this. I do have an interest in some type of meeting where CDOT can express to myself and whoever else wants to participate in that meeting, what does that actually mean? Is that just a small section, a larger section? What are the challenges with it, and is there a way for us to overcome that so that we can get to a 4-lane highway? And I do want to express my appreciation to CDOT for their willingness to seriously consider this possibility for a 4-lane highway. But I want to get to an understanding about what that means.
Sure. We'll
So
be back with you. Absolutely.
If you could share that with the team, I'd appreciate that. And let's try to get something set up where we can have a discussion about the challenges for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do we have a presentation from CDOT Gap? Or
Yeah, we can give a quick update. I don't know. We have the resident engineer that's overseeing the construction component. So if there are questions regarding, I don't believe we have a set presentation at this time, but if there are questions regarding.
Paul Neiman, do you want to come up and have any update for us? You gave a great presentation at the ESC meeting last time, and want to give you a chance if you have any updates for us. Well, I heard them, but maybe others that are on the table here may have some questions. So Paul Neiman is the project manager for the I-25 Gap.
So really, the only updates is we're continue to be massive construction project. We have a lot of traffic switches upcoming here. We have 4 bridges under construction right now. We are pretty much on schedule. We've lost some time due to some of the weather here, but we still are basically on our schedules that have been out there, which is the 2022 end date, 2021, or 2020, actually November of 2020, we should be done with the Package 1 area. November of 2021, we should be done with the Package 2 area.
That's north? Then south.
Then south, and then, sorry.
3 is in the middle.
The northern 6 miles,
Yep.
and then the southern 6 miles. The project's broken up into 3 6-mile components. So that northern 6 miles is our package one, what we're calling. So that should be done November 2020. November 2021 should be the southern section here, the Greenland Monument Hill. And then the middle section is somewhere in between that in December of 2021, but we need 2022 to pave it out, the final paving of that. So it will, for all intents and purposes, when you guys see it in December of 2021, it'll look the full width. We'll have all the lanes and all the pavement and the median barrier and everything will be set, ready to go. But we need next year, 2022, to actually do that final lift. So one of the big changes we are looking at, we're taking out a ton of the bridges. A couple of bridges we're not taking out is the Upper Lake, the UP Railroad Bridge, between Spruce Mountain Road. So that's one of the constricting factors that goes to this fourth lane. We're not touching that bridge. There was a whole lot of schedule impacts to do that. So that's one constriction there. We're not touching the Skyview Bridge, which is up there by Bear Dance, or the camping place there. And now we just got, we're waiting, I think Transportation Commission this week is supposed to vote to give us freight funds so we can now build that climbing lane up from Greenland, going southbound all the way up and over and attached into the port area there. So the port already had a fourth lane. So now it looks like we're going to get that money, so we're going to build that. So that'll add a few schedule impacts, but not really push us. It's just in paving. How do we get the paving done? So it's not going to really change our schedule much. To do that, we need to do the Palmer Divide Bridge, and that bridge, or the County Line Bridge, that bridge is also now ready to go. We've been looking at that. We have BE funding for that bridge, and that bridge looks like it's a go. We just need to finalize the design on that. But that'll be another component, because that bridge is not wide enough to carry the full template, and we knew it wasn't until we could replace it. So now we're going to replace that also. So that's a good thing for the project. That bridge will probably be built in 2021, so it's not a schedule impact. As you know, we're building 8 bridges, so we're just kind of moving the bridge crews along. They're into 4 of them now. They're going to get the 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th, and then they'll come into this last County Line Bridge. So other than that, that's...
Great. Well, thanks for letting me put you on the spot.
Sure.
Stan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a Gazette article about 16-hour lane closures this weekend. Could you just respond to that, maybe give the rest of us a little more insight about what's going on there?
So I think that is off as of now. We think we found a way to retool that. So what it was drainage pipes that we had put in a previous phase are not quite out far enough where we can attach on them to continue the phasing. Now that we switched Greenland over in a crossover situation, we couldn't get to those pipes. So in order to get to that, we tried to rework that and figure out how we could do it in a couple 8-hour shifts, but there's 2 pipes that are close together and they're under some of the existing pavement now. So we think we've worked a way to not do that now. We think we're going to do some temporary paving on the outside. It's going to do some extra guardrail stuff, and we think we've worked out. So we still, right now I heard them advertising that may be off this week, and we may cancel this weekend and then go. We do have several other closures like that, though, anticipated in the coming years, and we're trying to work through that and risk mitigate what we can do to not make sure we get off the road in 16 hours. So.
And maybe just a quick follow-up. I believe you do have a website or some way for citizens to get automatic pushes from you about lane closures. Why don't you mention briefly how a citizen can get to that, just for the public record here?
Yeah, so we have set up, we have just about every type of media and PR outlet imaginable on this project. So we have our own Facebook, we have the CDOT Facebook, we have co-trips, we have a 2100 text that you sign up for on the project. And I don't know if it's just you text to 2100, 2100, not exactly sure, but we have that information on the website that the citizens can get on that, and we'll specifically text to them, besides the smart work zone systems that kind of day-to-day are message boards that give information about the project also. So.
Okay, Don?
Just real quick, in our meeting Friday, you had mentioned some of the statistics in regards to accidents. Mm-hmm. I personally drive the Gap almost every day, and I've noticed that there isn't much of a difference in delays. But often in the community, we hear people saying, oh, there's all these more accidents and everybody's dying. And can you give us a quick feedback on kind of what your report was Friday as far as incidents, accidents, fatalities?
Right.
What do we have, how are we comparing to before construction started?
So what I showed you is we're collecting data every day. We've got a complete traffic crew that's collecting data. We're trying to see what crashes, what incidents we have every day. What we've collected now is not complete data. So we're collecting what we see when we're out there, and we're not there 24/7. Data I collected before, which is what CDOT collects through the Treasury Department, that data has been thoroughly looked through. That's public data that we put together to develop our crash data analysis on all these road stuff. So that data there I had shown, there was a 3-year period, we had 1,500 incidents in this corridor over a 3-year period, which was 2015, 2016, 2017. In that same period, we had, I think there was 14 fatalities in that 3-year period. So I've kind of used that as a base because we don't have the current data. CDOT lags about 6 months behind before they get that actual data, which is really the baseline. On the project, we track, our courtesy patrols are required to track every incident, no matter what they touch, they go to respond to, somebody stalled, whatever it is, or pick up. So we've had 1,000 incidents recorded, something like 1,100. I don't have the exact number here, but something like 1,100, 1,500 incidents that we've recorded. Of that, about 315 of those had been actual crashes. And so we have been on site about 319 days, just calendar days. And that was as of July 25th was all that data, so just a few weeks ago, whatever. So we're averaging still this 1 wreck a day. If you go back to that 2015 to 2017 data, we had 1,500 wrecks in 3 years. There's more than a wreck a day out there, an incident going on every single day. It's 1.6 incidents a day going on in there. So from our data, and we're out there quite a bit, we're just not there 24/7. Our data is showing we're not much worse from what we're looking at. And we are capturing this data and then looking at trends in this data. We have it by milepost, so we're trying to develop, if there's a trend going on, we will adjust some of our construction work zone message boards, things like that. So we've done that. So for us, we're not seeing this big trend. We saw some of the CSP data and some of that stuff, but remember the project, what the CSP data and the Gazette release, that data has not been massaged and analyzed correctly by CDOT because they had some different period, plus we were not in construction over the full 18 miles. That Gazette data showed the full 18 miles of construction crashes had doubled or went to 700 from 500, and that data was over the whole project. We had only been in construction from September through December in 2018 in the northern part of the project. We weren't anywhere south. So all that data was collected. So this is a problem with all the data. There's a lot of data out there, but it's not consistent, so I hesitate to say anything more about the data because we just don't know until CDOT analyzes it. And CDOT's like 6 months behind basically on that. That's kind of real baseline for us is the CDOT data once they go through it. So.
Yeah, Paul, we always hear the pushback. I want to commend you and thank you. Really, CDOT, I think, has managed that, not only the construction, but the traffic as well as possible. I get to drive to Denver as much as probably anybody, and 6 or 7 or 8 minutes longer for that trip, I think, is commendable. And Shane 24, which I drive every day, and we talked about the other day a little bit. You drive up there at 10 o'clock at night, they're starting to work, and you drive back at 8 in the morning, and we got a new road. And so great job. I just want to say that publicly. I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for John or Shane? Comments? Yeah, Charlie?
This one is really too easy, but the North Academy entrance on I-25, which is actually the south entrance to the U.S. Air Force Academy, if you could just have someone drive over that bridge and look at it.
Yeah, we are taking a look at it. It's in terrible
shape.
Correct. We're having our maintenance crew taking a look at it
okay.
already.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Thank you. Gentlemen?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is our statewide transportation advisory meeting, which I just presented a moment ago. Executive Director's report now, Andy. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real briefly, 2 items wanted to mention. As I mentioned earlier, Joe Urban, our AAA director, is going to be retiring end of September, early October. He gave us enough lead time to actually start the process to try to hire a replacement, and we actually have interviews tomorrow, pretty much all day. Can't get into details with it, but Really pleased with the candidate pool, a really strong group of applicants, and I can say that we're interviewing 8 folks tomorrow, so I'll keep you posted, but hopefully we'll get somebody on board to do some cross-training before Joe's out of here. Second thing I was going to mention, thanks to our partner Jeff Bond from Peterson, reminded me that your next board meeting in September is on September 11th. And there may be some 9/11 commemoration events that are happening, so want to get that out there to see if we need to find another start time, another meeting date. We don't need to decide right now. We could send out a poll and see what availability looks like, but if you have any initial suggestions, I'm open to ideas.
No, I hadn't had a chance to catch up with you a little bit, but we have numbers in Teller County at the exact same time, 9 a.m. on September 11th. Of course, Eastern time is the time the first plane hit, approximately. So I was considering having our own, and we can talk about this, whether we have our own little observance for just a few minutes before we begin that meeting, but I appreciate your idea on a consideration perhaps moving that. Any thoughts on that from around the table?
Well, I had already planned to go to the commemoration we have. I think ours is down here that MAC is putting together. Or is it not? No, it's not the MAC. It's at 10 o'clock at Memorial Park. So that's going to take. I know that's going to take out a lot of the locals. I certainly will intend to be there. I was in NORAD on 9/11. I will be at the memorial.
Other thoughts? Well, but we'll look for that doodle poll to come out, perhaps consideration of moving our meeting. What would be an alternative date that we could think about? The following week, then, the 18th?
We'll have to check and see. A few of us may be out of pocket that week. We'll put our heads together and look at some options, and we'll kick that out. Wednesdays seem to work really well for this group. It avoids other council and commission meetings, but yeah, we'll look at some options there.
Would you move the RTA meeting as well on that same afternoon?
I don't know that we would have to.
Wouldn't have to because
afternoon's probably clear.
Okay.
Earlier, that's a possibility.
But then
we're shaping up to have a lot of items, I think, on the September agenda, so we may have to look at another option, another date.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Yep. Stan?
Thank you. That following week, which I think is perhaps a week for consideration, and we're talking the week of the 16th of September, that's the same week of the Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC DC fly-in. So about 40 people go to that, and there's going to be some board members that will be at that.
Yep. There's never a good day. We're all busy. We are all busy. That's right. Okay, member entity announcements. Go quickly around. Stan, you want to start us? El Paso?
Yes, thank you very much. First off, we just recently completed our county fair. We had 25,000 participants, and it was the 114th county fair for El Paso County. I always like to make the point, I think it's pretty cool, that the very first time we held the El Paso County Fair, people showed up in Conestoga wagons and Surreys. So it's been around a long, long time. Also, just a quick reminder, from 30 August to 2 September is the National Guard Association of the United States National Convention in Denver. It's the 141st National Convention, and it's the first one in Colorado in a very, very long time. There'll be representatives from the National Guard from every state at that convention in Denver from 30 August to 2 September. And if everybody just don't forget, continue to think your way through this and how to make sure that we get everybody counted. The census is going to take place in the spring. 1 April of 2020 is Census Day, and everybody does need to be counted. Everybody on a military base all get counted. If they're stationed here, they get counted on our census. All students from every school will be in session, and regardless of what state they're a citizen of, because they'll be in school here, they get counted here. And we want to make sure that everybody gets counted across El Paso County and Teller County and the other counties that we represent here, because if the more you get counted, the more value that generates as far as federal funds coming into our communities. The last census, we were about 10,000 short, and that ended up representing over the decade a couple $100 million worth of shortfall that should have come here that didn't come here. So we want to make sure that we don't fail to do that. There is a census committee that's doing a lot of work on this. They even have a team that's going to be going into homeless camps and getting people in the homeless camps counted. So that's the level of effort that is that they're working on to try to get everybody counted. So please don't forget about that. Within your own public agencies, you might want to consider some type of marketing campaign or of some type for citizens to make sure that they're up and ready to be counted. And the Census Committee can talk to your town council or whatever you may have, or any other association or group. They're happy to do that to help get ready. And one last thing, they also still need a really large number of census takers. And in El Paso County, at least, it's $16.50 an hour. So if you know anybody looking for a temporary job to make a few bucks, they are looking for people to help with the census. Thank you.
Mr. Williams, anything else from El Paso? Andy?
Sorry for the interruption. I was asked if we could take the group photo before we finish up member announcements, because we may start losing a couple of folks. I think that had some conflicts.
Quickly do that?
If we could quickly convene.
If we're in a rush?
Is that okay?
Okay. So if we could just convene up here, please, and including our military members as our non-voting members of the board. Appreciate you coming up as well.
I guess we stay in chairs.
Yeah, we'll keep the... Oh, you want to move everybody standing?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
pretty bad right here, so I'm going to try to
Okay.
move everybody this way.
Okay.
At least so we can get the lighting better.
Okay, continuing around the table, Bruce, update from Victor?
Yeah, just a couple of things. This weekend, starting on Friday, the 16th through the 18th, is the annual motorcycle rally in Cripple Creek, and that's a celebration of, they celebrate the veterans and military people. There's the motorcycle rally, I believe, starts in Woodland Park.
Right.
And it'll come up with a rally, and they'll have a big rally and a big celebration up in Cripple Creek, and then we also get some overflow in Victor. Also, on September 7th, we have our fourth or fifth borough race in Victor. I think it's a big thing. It's throughout the western United States. This group of people go all over. So they'll be in Victor. It's in the past, it's always been a lot of fun. I think it runs about 2 hours, and I forget how many miles, but they go all over town. And in addition to that, a bunch of the local merchants and stuff are going to have a sidewalk sale. And one other item, on the 17th, this Saturday, the Fossil Beds in Florissant are celebrating their 50th anniversary, and I believe they're going to have a free day and an open house at the Fossil Beds.
You're stealing my thunder, Bruce. That's
Yeah,
right, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, Norm. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Yep. Other further updates on our military folks? No? Don? Yeah? Anything from Green Mountain Falls? No? Any Springs? Delano? Fountain?
Yeah, we Have a really big fall festival on Labor Day weekend, so I brought flyers for everybody if you want to come on down and have some fun. There's something going on at a lot of different evenings, so I'd love to have you come visit.
Yeah, I have nothing, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Just further update on a couple things on this weekend. So this Fossil Bed's 50th anniversary of the founding. We're going to have members of Congress there. Doug Lamborn will be there, and I'm going to make some opening remarks at beginning at 10 a.m. This Veterans Ride, if you have not seen that, you need to come up. About 4,000 to 5,000 motorcycles and maybe 20,000 people in Cripple Creek. The massive flags. We got lots of food, fun, live music. So if you're available this weekend, please come up to Cripple Creek in Teller County to celebrate our veterans. We'll have the actual the ride begins at Woodland Park High School, departing the high school at about 10 a.m. So Highway 67, the dedicated several years ago, is a POW MAA Memorial Highway. Will be ridden by cyclists beginning between 10 a.m. and about 11 a.m. It takes about 30 minutes for those motorcycles to actually roll into town. Many of them on Harleys, the typical, you can hear the sound. And then the ceremony itself begins at 12 noon. We'll recognize double amputees. There'll be a recognition of our most recent Afghanistan fatality. Master Sergeant Robbins, fifth group, was killed in action, or killed in Afghanistan, died in Afghanistan it's about 3 weeks ago. So he'll be recognized as well. That's all I have. Pretty good morning. Thanks, everybody, for attending the update. Time is 11:10, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, with that event.